Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz saxophonist John Ellis. We caught up with him in New York in April 2020 to talk about how he found out about canceled shows, his last show prior to the COVID-19 shutdown, and the hopeful future ahead. We did this in late April 2020. Enjoy.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, not too much. How you holding up?
Hanging in there.
Yeah.
Well, I'm making the best out of it, the best I can. It's a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So are you up in New York now?
Yep, East Village.
Okay, gotcha. Has anything gotten any easier or, any daylight up there?
Not really.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know. I mean, there's some adjustment, there's like the difficulties of transitioning into the new thing. And so I guess there's, I don't know if you can call it easier or not, but we're a little more adjusted to what life is like now with the masks and everything else. And there's a lot of things are closed, obviously. But we're in a good location in the sense that we can walk a lot of places. We don't have to get on the train, so that's good.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a part of it. It's like the longer this goes on, the more that we kind of get adapted to the evolution of how all of this is kind of coming together. I mean, when this began, I don't know that we understood the magnitude of thing that was going on and what it all meant. So now I think you just kind of, we're doing the same thing here. We're wearing masks and we're still kind of.
Are you in Kansas City?
Yeah, we're in Kansas City. So we're still kind of waiting a little. We've been waiting, and my concept of time is whacked out here, but it's like we've been waiting for the tsunami to hit. Mm-hmm. But I think the curve is starting to go down, but there's still this fear because they're going to lift the restrictions for the whole state May 3rd and then our county May 15th, that people are just going to go haywire. But I think they have...
Going to go haywire, meaning...
Just going out. I mean, I think anybody going out and doing anything now is a fear. There's a fear factor no matter what. And
right.
I mean, because
and you think that as soon as they let it loose, you think everyone's just going to go out and be in bars and restaurants and clubs and everything?
I think that's the fear. I think that's the fear of government officials, that whether or not that will happen or not. I think we've all been afraid enough now that we don't want this to recreate itself, and we've heard about a second wave. I think there's going to be a level of responsibility for most people. You're always going to have a group of people that aren't going to have any reverence for it, but I think overall, I think there's a part of everybody that's like, no one's going to run out and start getting crazy, I don't think. I think we're all, just in anticipation to get some normalcy back in our lives, and I think those little things that they will phase back in is going to be a huge dose of, good for people,
Right. I mean, so to me the question is sort of normalcy, if you define it as get some normalcy back in your life, what is that? You know what I mean? What does that look like exactly?
Well, for me, for instance, I have two children. I have a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old, and if I can just go to a library, if I can just go into a place without having to wait in line, like for instance, this morning, we went to get donuts and you have to wait 6 feet apart just to go in one at a time, with masks. Like if we can get to a point where we can, kind of do this in a different way and have some feeling that we're not in some dystopian novel, I think that's going to be, at least in a very small way, as this moves on to get to that point. I talked to someone yesterday in Norway that said that kindergartners are going to start school at the beginning of next week, of course, with safe distancing, and there's going to potentially be jazz concerts there with groups of 500 or less in June. And that right there, that's the most hope I've heard about anything in the world in a month and a half.
Look, if we could just all go back to being normal, it would be great. I mean, I think everybody wants that. I guess the thing that I'm wondering is, if there's no vaccine, no herd immunity, the virus is still around and still just as contagious as it ever was, and still just as potential to be deadly especially for a certain population. What is going back to normal mean? You know what I mean? Like that fact doesn't change without very clear things, which is like we have to have we have to have a vaccine, we have to have herd immunity, we have to have some other kind of existing treatment. But I don't know. I mean, to me, I feel like everything else is wishful thinking. You know, it doesn't. Those facts don't change. They don't change because we wish they changed. You know, they don't change because we want to go back to things. We want to have. You know, I would love to go back to Smalls and play in a little basement. You know, my last 2 gigs were at Smalls. I would love to go down there. But I mean, the fact that I would love to do it doesn't mean that I should, or doesn't mean that anyone should. You know, it doesn't change the danger of this particular moment we're in. So I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of there's going to be some fits and starts. I think. I mean, I think the fact that everybody wants to get back to normal is so clear, but I think there's going to be consequences.
I agree.
And so then people are going to scale it back again. So there's going to probably be a lot of like, oh, we tried to go back, but then, oh my God, then the numbers went up again, and a bunch of people started getting sick. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't know. I don't see. You know, all of a sudden we're getting donuts. At least not in East Village. I mean, maybe it depends on where you are. Sure. I mean, if you're in a place where there's not a lot of cases, you know, obviously it should be considered differently, I think. But
yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and I know things are a little bit different up there than they are here. I know with us, you know, we're spread out. We have cars and we have a latitude. If we want to drive to a lake, we can do that. And I know in other areas, it's more of a clamp down. And I've talked to other people that specifically before around the, 11th to 13th decided to go to a wooded area. People, they had to make choices as to what they're doing. But yeah, I'm not under.
With kids, I think a lot of my friends that have kids were quickly planning their exit strategy. Like, how do I get out of the city? I mean, other people too. But, I live with my lady in a studio apartment in East Village. It's small. If you had a kid or even just one kid, but especially if you had two kids, if you were even in one bedroom or two bedroom apartment in the city, the playgrounds are closed. It's rough, I think. I mean, and you have that kid energy doesn't stop just because you can't go outside, so.
Right.
Some of my friends are just getting thrashed by their young children because their kids are home and they're home, and a bunch of people are still trying to work from home, but then with their kids too. So I totally understand that if you have the capacity to get outside the city somehow, but most people don't.
Yeah,
that's a real privilege to be able to do that. So
yeah. I want to ask you. It almost seems like we look back at like the 10th to the 13th as this crystallized, time in America that was just totally different. What was going on? How did things kind of start happening for you where you realized, everything was going to change in the way that it's changed up to this point?
That was when I played my last couple of gigs. I played, I think I played on the 10th and the 11th, both at Small, with two different bands. I played with Will Bernard. I played with Adam Birnbaum. It was scary both nights. There was a lot of discussion. We sort of had a sense we were at the end of our chances to do this. There was a lot of I had a tour. I was supposed to leave at the end of March and go to Europe. And so there was a lot of like, is this thing going to happen? I had friends that were in the middle of tours overseas, and they were, things were starting to, it was just, that period was very much like from country to country. Is this, are we going to try to keep doing this? And so tours were getting canceled kind of midstream, or like, and people were trying to find their way home. And, so I guess I played, I guess it was the night. Maybe it was the night of the 11th when the travel ban was announced for people coming back from Europe. That was when it was clearly getting really bad in Italy. That was the thing that ended any hopes that I would go do this tour in Europe. So yeah, I don't know. It was just sort of like, it was a crazy moment. It was a crazy moment. I think. People, I think one of the things that's still very difficult about it, even though we're now moved into a phase of maybe more like acceptance or more like we're in this new life, is that there's just so much uncertainty still. It's a new virus. There's people don't really know what's going to happen, and society is not comfortable with uncertainty. So there's really like, so how long is this going to last? I don't know. How long is it going to last in different states? I don't know. So that beginning period in March was sort of the beginning of that uncertainty. Are we supposed to be wearing a mask? Are we supposed to be? How does this thing work? What is the right amount of risk? Or like to take, and what is the right amount of fear? And I think trying to find the answers to that are still quite challenging, but they were very challenging in the beginning because it was sort of conflicting information everywhere, and I mean I think that's still the case, and information changing a lot. So I have friends in China that were reaching out to me, which was really fascinating. I went to China twice last year, and friends in China that were watching things happen here, with horror because it had happened in their country already, and I have two friends in China that sent me masks in the mail.
Wow.
And it's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, just like, we're worried about you guys. It seems like people aren't taking the mask thing seriously enough. You hear, and also in the beginning, you couldn't find any of that. So that was also scary to watch. Like the panic buying was happening, in the beginning with people just like draining all the grocery stores and stuff. I don't know how much that happened where you guys are at, but I'm sure it happened some.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, all of that was sort of, just kind of strange. And then then you're like every day, do we have it? Do we have it already somehow? Did we get it? We took our temperature with the meat thermometer a couple times. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot to think about. I also had this sense quickly that my world, which is playing live jazz shows and traveling, was going to be altered for a very long time. I mean, I feel like even before my friends, I felt like I was thinking that this is not going to be short. This is not going to be a short change. And the weight of thinking that way is hard. The heaviness of that. Just like, wow. Because that's like what I've done for the last 30 years. So yeah, just sort of thinking of that is still challenging. And and so also just feeling like, okay, well, to me, it's not enough to. I quickly tried to figure out how to get some kind of home recording thing happening because I've never done that, but always probably should have. So then I was doing tons of research on that, and I think, but I still think for me the capacity to make music alone with a microphone, I mean, it's exciting in a way because it's new. I haven't done it much, but it's still not enough. Like we're, I do this for the social part of it. The doing it with other people is so big. It's so, I mean, big is the wrong word. It is the thing. It's critical. It's the main aspect. So then trying to think about what are the imaginative ways that we can still collaborate, and I have a lot of thoughts about that. I'm still trying to figure that out, but I think I think we're all going to be needing that, and you can see a lot of things happening on social media, but I'm hoping that even more than just the social media things, that there'll be some other kind of collaboration. So all of that's kind of interesting. I think some of these things may change how we interact musically. I think there'll be some elements of this that stay with us, regardless of how we end up coming back to playing live.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of things that, just like anything, like any wave of change that goes through society, and obviously this is magnanimous. It's something that no one's ever experienced. It's going to be heavy, and it's going to be lasting, but I think it's just the way it is, man. I mean, and I think it also exhibits how little control we have over everything, realistically. Everything can get grinded to a halt. I think the biggest thing that gets me, and it's probably watching kids around me, that's the most heartbreaking thing, seeing my kids is that everything that we've been taught, which is primarily since we've been in kindergarten, which is go out and engage with the world, eye contact, shake hands, do all these things. We've been told not only to not do any of that, but if you do it, that it could be wrong. So we're psychologically reversing everything that we've been taught our whole lives as being just and good and virtuous. And that's the thing that I find the most. Yeah, hugs. Are you kidding me? I mean, at one point, 3 weeks ago, I'm a visual artist too. I made a big painting for one of my dear friends. He has a basement he just redid. And, you know, it's like everything during this time. You just hadn't had a chance to do it. I finally went to the hardware store, got a big piece of wood, did it. He loved it, sent him a picture. And I went over to his house. We stayed socially distant. I hung it up, and he couldn't take it, man. He came up and he just grabbed me, and I hugged him back. And it's like, you know, I've gotten to that point where it's like, there's a part of it that's just like, yeah, man, you know, and it's not about finding fault or having some level of like vindictiveness like after 9/11 where it's like, we got to go after this enemy. It's like, you're just literally looking at Mother Nature, realizing that at the end of the day, we have to slow down and watch a jellyfish go through a canal in Venice. We got to watch and listen to the birds like Eric Dolphy did when he played the sax. We get the chance to reboot and slow down because at the end of the day, we're dealing with nature. Nature will be here when we're gone. And that's the thing. I think that's the reboot of our cognition and our brains right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as painful as that is, there are some aspects of that that are probably necessary for us to remember. I mean, I think it's easy for us as humans to forget that we are small in the face of something like nature, and in spite of all the things we've accomplished, we're fragile. You know, that there are things can be over in a second for us, and things that are also kind of out of our control in many ways. And I think that that's very hard for people to. I mean, we have gotten so confident, so I think it's very hard to accept. But man, the stuff with the kids, and I mean, just what you're telling me about your special needs kid is heartbreaking. I mean, it's so hard. You know, in my discussion with my students during this time, we've talked about that quite a bit. And for me, it has always been that way in the sense that it's a place I can go by myself and work on something alone, and that's something that has to do with vibrations and sound. And I think there's probably aspects of why I'm in this life that have to do with that. You know, the need for that. And I think I'm really grateful that I can still do it. I mean, I have a space I can go to that nobody is in, thankfully, so it feels safe and I can make noise. And yeah, I mean, it's this sort of, you know, more profound reasons as to why we make music, I think, can be reinvestigated and deepened, considered. You know, just things that have to do with healing, self-healing, and hopefully spreading some of those sounds in a way that touch other people and create some kind of contact that, you know, if we can't hug each other, we can pass the music around. I don't know.
Amen. Yeah. Well, my final question to you is this. You know, we're all going to get back to the music. One way or another, it's going to happen. And when the musician gets on stage and when the audience member goes back into the club, what do you hope we all realize? What kind of revelations do you hope we get from this time away?
Wow, you mean once we're back in the club?
Yeah, once we get back to normal, or not. I don't want to use that quote term. Just when we get back.
Yeah, when we get back. What do I hope we all learn? Well, I guess first and foremost, currently, I'm just hoping that most of us and many of us, especially in our community, stay healthy. You know, there's a lot of vulnerable people, vulnerable elders, and so that's on my mind all the time. But it's hard to imagine that there won't be a kind of cathartic, you know, big, enveloping, warm, loving thing when we're actually able to pass the music amongst each other as the musicians playing together and then within the audience. And I don't even know how to predict how that's going to feel or what to hope for, but if we can all stay safe and reconvene in person, I can only imagine what it's going to feel like, you know. And I'm definitely looking forward to it, but at the same time, I don't want to rush it if it puts anyone at risk, you know. That's for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. Hey, man, I appreciate you talking to me. It's obviously an extraordinary time, but I think it's probably good to talk about the music and get a little bit of this out there. So thanks for taking time out. Good luck. Stay safe. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. You too. Stay safe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to John for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.